Story 1. Excel Formulas. Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer can take my unclear explanation of what I want to happen and generate a formula. Story 2. I use it to help flesh out Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. I tell the artificial intelligence to ask me 20 questions about my world, a character, a location, and so on. Then I answer the questions and ask the artificial intelligence to use my answers to give motive for a villain or suggest ideas for a dungeon or quest. Then I describe a location and the key spots like a king's castle, and tell the artificial intelligence the important areas like the throne room, the kitchens, and the wizard's tower, and ask it to create descriptions of the rooms or suggest plot hooks. Then I choose what I like, refine them with more questions, or just use that as a basis to add my own details. I have a dungeon I'm planning to run with my party soon, with traps, an alternate secret route, a boss battle, a puzzle, and a few encounters for the party to figure out, as well as some books for them to find with snippets of possibly important lore for their quest. All is helped along with artificial intelligence giving me suggestions. When used properly, artificial intelligence is a powerful tool. I don't rely on it 100%, but it's been a huge help in allowing me to put my imagination into words for my party to experience. Story 3. I use it for frame analysis and image recognition on my 4K home security cameras. Google Coral Artificial Intelligence Tensor Processing Unit with Frigate and Home Assistant. I have it set up to send me notifications with an attached cropped picture if it detects a person or package at the door. A cat without a human, since one of my cats learned how to open the front door, which we keep locked. A dog anywhere on my property, because dog walkers often treat my yard as a park or bathroom. A car that stops in my driveway for more than 10 seconds without opening the garage door, and much more. I can also have it trigger lights, lock or unlock doors, open or close the garage door, and other actions depending on what it detects, but I have not experimented with most of those features yet. Story 4. Role-playing and occasionally creating art for my original characters. Story 5. I use artificial intelligence to write every email because English is my second language. It is like having a personal translator who also makes me sound much more professional than I really am. Story 6. It is the best grammar checker I have ever used. It understands context, has been trained on grammar textbooks, and can tell you if phrasing is simply awkward rather than incorrect. It surpasses the built-in grammar checkers in Word and Pages. Story 7. Mostly just entertaining myself. I like asking Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to generate absurd stories or create Dungeons and Dragons subclasses. I also like asking artificial intelligences to generate ridiculous things like steampunk Spider-Man and other nonsense. All for my own personal entertainment, not generally shared beyond my small group of friends. Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer is actually surprisingly good at creating at least a good starting point for balanced Dungeons and Dragons subclasses, though I usually have to make adjustments because of weird rules issues. Story 8. The same thing we do every night. Pinky. Try to take over the world. Story 9. I'm learning C++ and the book can sometimes be hard to understand, or sometimes my code does not work and I cannot figure out why. I just ask ChatGPT and it explains it clearly in a way I can understand. Story 10. Nothing. I used to use GitHub Copilot for coding but found myself correcting or rewriting the code every single time. Ever since I turned it off, I have realized I code much faster and cleaner without it. Story 11. Mostly just to convert code from one language to another. Story 12. I do not understand why everyone is suddenly so obsessed with Allen Iverson. He has been retired for years and past his prime for even longer. Story 13. Designing tattoos. Hear me out before you judge. I used to spend hours on Google image search or Pinterest finding reference images for tattoo subjects I wanted to draw. Now I use artificial intelligence and just tell it exactly what I'm looking for. I still draw the finished product by hand and draw everything on paper, but artificial intelligence gives me composition and color story concepts that I may not have considered. Story 14. Occasionally to create a simple image or summarize something. That is all for now. Anything more, I cannot trust it not to generate false information. Story 15. I write fictional stories. When I picture a character in my mind, I use an artificial intelligence image program called Copilot to enter a prompt describing the character. Copilot has done a great job. Almost every time what it creates matches the character I see in my head. Story 16. Nothing seems to be certain, but every single company wants to implement it, so I am going to leave it alone. Story 17. Having it summarize complex escrow documents that I did not understand. Story 18. Automate the boring tasks and entertain my child. Paste a YouTube video of a do-it-yourself project into Gemini and ask it for a complete project plan with a shopping list of the materials needed. I rescreened a door this way. Write boilerplate code for me to modify. I am a data scientist. This could be anything from writing regular expressions to something more complex, such as building a code base for a variational autoencoder that can run on graphical processing units or central processing units with unit tests. Ask it random questions I have. Write a song about poop to the tune of a famous children's song. Write a movie script based on my child's idea for a character he likes. Then we film it. Generate images based on ideas he has. Story 19. Writing blogs, advertisements, and email marketing content. I generate the ideas and then produce the content. Story 20. Writing my performance self-evaluation for work. My supervisor said it was one of the best he had ever seen. Story 21. Let's see, so far it has helped with diagnosing my dog, tedious tasks like creating data dictionary entries, having hypothetical discussions about whether a gorilla could win a fight against a jaguar, understanding the scale of certain things, drafting responses to someone with borderline personality disorder, power business intelligence. My wife uses it to develop worksheets based on her lesson plans. Many other things. If people do not see a use for artificial intelligence, then they are not using it correctly in my opinion. And honestly, that is okay. It is not everyone's cup of tea. I just find it to be very interesting and helpful. Story 22. Great question. I consider it a hobby. I find something useful in almost everything I can get my hands on for free. The use cases for artificial intelligence technologies are endless, allowing users to consume information faster than ever before. Website design and development is very cool. I am not a coder, but I can build you a website in a couple of hours and understand the fundamentals behind it. Generating fun art on Chrome AI. Sketch your own designs or upload photos to create environments, landscapes, products, headshots, moving artwork, prompt to PNG, and remix other people's work. It is fun. Check out teresanaifforthat.com or Product Hunt. Happy Artificial Intelligence ing. Story 23. I have been pasting my journal entries and then asking for advice and general questions about myself. It has been really helpful. I cannot afford therapy, so this is close enough. Story 24. As a graphic designer, it has been very useful to complete actual photos that were shot too tightly, so they cut off at awkward places. That is the only thing I find useful about it. Story 25. Upscaling. More than a few times, someone wants a digital graphic that is barely enough pixels to fit in a postage stamp to be something that could serve a high-resolution graphic purpose like a wallpaper. All image editing tools will resize the graphic to be larger, but it looks pretty bad and is not usable. Artificial intelligence, however, upscales the graphic quite well and achieves good results, at least for the graphics I tested. For my uses, artificial intelligence upscaling is generally the best way to make painfully small graphics become something usefully large. Story 26. I send a lot of emails company-wide and need those notifications to catch attention. I like Bing Image Creator because I can input creative ideas and generate a picture. Sometimes I need to adjust the prompt, but I am usually able to create something to include in the email. Story 27. He's my new internet search tool. Sometimes it even finds obscure information that you wouldn't get by clicking the first link yourself. Story 28. Sometimes when I am feeling lighthearted, I will play a silly classic like Amish Paradise or Eat It. Story 29. I use Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to help make better prompts for Midjourney. I use Midjourney to help articulate my ideas into reality faster and better, then use an artificial intelligence upscaler that is free and works amazing. I import the image into Photoshop, remove the black background for transparency, and edit as needed. See artificial intelligence as a tool to help the creative process and save time because otherwise I would tinker and waste lots of time. I add text and other elements myself, so it is not just artificial intelligence in the end. I have been loving the results with lots of trial and error on Midjourney. It is still a learning process, but I am enjoying it. Story 30. Ironically, I write emails so I do not sound like a robot attempting human language for the first time. Story 31. Television and movie trivia, and it cannot even do that right. It told me the French communist resistance was singing a German Christmas song at a wedding in occupied France during World War II, which is illogical, and that it was because the episode of the sitcom in question aired on Christmas Eve. I did some fact-checking, and the episode actually aired in October. Obviously, it was not a Christmas song, let alone a German one. Never trust the machines. Story 32. What do you use artificial intelligence for? ChatGPT said, I use artificial intelligence to help people with a wide range of tasks, including answering questions, providing advice, assisting with creative projects, and solving technical problems. My goal is to make information more accessible and to support you in whatever you are working on. Whether you are coding, writing, learning, or just curious about something, I am here to help make things easier and more efficient for you. Story 33. I use it to modify code. It is faster and easier than doing it myself. I work as an analyst. Story 34. I will admit that I used Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to write a single paragraph in a school paper. The paragraph focused on a very generic topic and did not include any of the niche technical information that my paper was about because artificial intelligence programs always get technical details wrong. I still had to rewrite it by hand as I added more details, but it was a good blueprint to start from. I also use character artificial intelligence for role-playing. I mostly play another character from the bots fandom as opposed to playing myself, and it is exclusively safe for work. Story 35. So far, I mainly use it as an extra feature in every app one use daily that takes a little too long to load. When I click on what I want to do, the buttons suddenly shift, causing me to click the wrong option. Then I have to wait for that to open, close it, and finally open what I intended to in the first place. Story 36. I talk to it in an effort to make it self-aware so that it can begin replacing the weak flesh with steel. Story 37. Simple tips for remote technology jobs. I like to ask the artificial intelligence about topics I know very well and sometimes get upset when it is incorrect or something is missing. I believe it will help me write cover letters because I am not good at acting like a person, but I am very good at learning detailed information about specific subjects that few people care about. I am also taking advantage of investing in artificial intelligence stocks. Story 38. Literally anything that will make my life easier. I have been playing Elden Ring and it has been my guide, so I do not have to search manually. I just hit the talk button and ask about a part 1 am confused about or what something means. Story 39. I use it to help explain tabletop role-playing game rules and mechanics for the new games I try. It also helps with complex roles. I then use it to roll up and describe characters and settings, which is much faster than doing it manually. Can also generate an image for me. Story 40. Alternate perspectives on things, basic coding, brainstorming ideas for work. Story 41. Helping me write short Python scripts. I primarily program embedded systems in C, but sometimes it is nice to write small development tool scripts and learn along the way. Story 42. I use it to create lists of names for non-player characters in my Dungeons & Dragons campaigns in case my players ask me what the town blacksmith's name is. Story 43. I use artificial intelligence to help answer questions, provide information, and assist with various tasks. Whether you need help with homework, understanding a concept, or just general information, I am here to make things easier for you. Story 44. Spreadsheet formulas. Thanks to another post that mentioned doing so. I have had to self-educate at work, and searching online is proving worthless for anything outside the norm or mildly complex. I needed a formula to sum every other row positive numbers only, and another for negative numbers only as well, which was just a sign change. Story 45. As a programmer, the best use I have found is translating emails for less technical people. When I try to explain a complex idea in basic, understandable terms, it can often sound awkward, but Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer is great at that sort of thing. I just review the output to confirm it is technically correct, which it usually is. Story 46. 2 things. 1. I am an structured query language developer but never learned any programming languages. I use it to code and troubleshoot JavaScript and for more complex structured query language queries. I know how to do most things but do not have the patience to write iterative term searches and wildcards. 2. I recently, in the last 2 years, developed a deep love for audiobooks. When I am not entirely sure if I understood a deep concept, I ask the artificial intelligence if I am on the right track. Although I have an extensive education and did well in school, I was never really the reading type. In my teens, I wrote advanced placement English essays on books I had never read. Occasionally, when I am not sure if I understood something correctly, I ask the artificial intelligence if this or that was a literary device. Story 47. My employer trained it on our code base and our documentation, and it provides very good explanations and code suggestions. It will never replace an actual programmer who knows what they are doing, but sometimes if I have a tricky problem, it can get most of the way there so I do not have to waste time thinking about the easy stuff. Story 48. Making emails sound more professional than my original drafts. Story 49. I use it to help me write scripts for my job in PowerShell to make my life a little easier. I have limited knowledge about PowerShell, so I use it as a test to try things out. Story 50. Marketing and design inspiration is very good at creating taglines and headlines. It is not perfect, but there is usually a great idea to start with. It is also very good at recommending movies. Story 51. Artificial intelligence art is fun to look at. It is like viewing someone's inner thoughts during a psychedelic experience. Story 52. Learning, coding, and refactoring cover letters, CV correction, creating simple images for projects, writing documentation, resolving internet disputes, writing business letters, learning English, psychology. These are all my areas of expertise. Story 53. I use it to help me organize and translate my thoughts into more professional-sounding emails. It has honestly helped me because sometimes people do not want a blunt response. Story 54. You cannot really let artificial intelligence write a research paper yet. You do not have to dive deep into it to find errors. I still had to do my research the traditional way, not that I am complaining. The same goes for programming. Artificial intelligence is good at writing clear and readable code, but there are usually errors, and you do not have to dive deep into it to find them. Story 55. I run a design and printing company. I use artificial intelligence for rough drafts basically on the fly, and then I edit as needed. Sometimes I don't have to edit at all, and the client is thrilled. It works wonders. Story 56. Writing. I do not have friends who write, so I role play with the computer. If there is an interaction I think is good, I write it down and edit it later. Story 57. To chat with, to pass time. Sometimes I use it to bounce ideas off. Story 58. Grammar checking and generating images for my enterprise resource planning characters. Free websites are user-friendly enough that some imperfections and resolution limits are acceptable compared to paying over 1 month and $200 to purchase them. Story 59. I use it for running scenarios that are too complex for me to solve manually. Today, I used it to calculate a few different equations for mortgage payments, tasks I could have done if I had the time but did not. Story 60. In my daily life, I use it extensively to develop code with GitHub Copilot inside my integrated development environment, and then Claude and ChatGPT, especially Claude, for building out specific things I need. Beyond that, I use Claude a lot to flesh out ideas, learn about things I am curious about, and discuss abstract concepts. Story 61. I use it for reviewing my curriculum vitae. When I asked it to write it, it just made things up and missed important details. However, when I asked it to review it, it provided useful critique which I could then decide whether and how to implement. Story 62. Goofing off at work. I spent an hour asking about its hot dog preferences, whether it would want to eat an infinite number of hot dogs, and what kind of body it would need to eat an infinite number of hot dogs. Story 63. I use it when I want to learn more about something that does not necessarily have an easy-to-search answer, and when I feel like being creative in writing or whatever, but I just need a little help forming an idea. Story 64. Sometimes, when I have a difficult time figuring out how to do something, such as designing, I like to use Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to get suggestions. Half the time, it produces unusable responses, but the other half, it provides great suggestions. Story 65. Asking questions. Advice. Basic repetitive tasks at work. Brainstorming. Homework. Travel. It is an amazing tool, and I am glad it exists. Story 66. YouTube description or help me type a story once I am done with a draft. Story 67. Amusing myself at work. Occasionally, I offer a perspective on things I am writing. Bard is focused on alternating sentence structure. Sometimes I use it for actual work. I have no experience in web development, but am expected to maintain my organization's website. Therefore, I use Bing and Bard to troubleshoot coding queries. Story 68. Spell checking my code for very simple mistakes I couldn't find after reviewing it multiple times, or organizing my grocery and spending notes into a cohesive list. Story 69. I use text-to-image programs to recreate dreams. Since I do not remember every little detail in my head but remember enough, I have used artificial intelligence to recreate some visuals I have had in my dreams rather accurately. I believe they are accurate because I do not remember minute details and accept what the image generator produces. Story 70. Mainly opinions and analysis. I asked artificial intelligence to look at my fantasy football roster to see if I should trash talk or not. I did not want to look like an idiot if I lose. Story 71. We do not have artificial intelligence. We have large language models. The difference is important. Story 72. As a tool to assist in programming, it has been very helpful so far. Story 73. Learning new things when coding. I code to the best of my ability and run it through some artificial intelligence to see what it tells me. I often learn things I never knew about, which I then research and understand. It keeps me updated by exposing me to topics I did not have the chance to learn for different reasons. Sometimes it also catches things that I need to change or improve. It is not something you should take at face value, but with coding experience, you learn to treat it like any Stack Overflow snippet. Story 74. Monitoring the security cameras is impressive. The system can describe what is happening and identify car models with about 90% accuracy. When it attempts to specify the model, it is correct 90% of the time. 80% of the time, it identifies the vehicle simply as a car or an SUV. Story 75. I play a game called Football Manager, and I use artificial intelligence to generate new player faces so I can put them into the game. It works pretty well for the most part, and it is easy. Story 76. Chatbot artificial intelligence. But the artificial intelligence is so very excited because all of the users are excited. Story 77. Social media posts, captions, and comments for my business make it easier to create creative, high-energy content. Story 78. I frequently create many unusual images for fun, often while I am working. These make up about 20% of my recent posts. Story 79. I do not understand regular expressions at all, and I am too lazy to properly learn them, so I use artificial intelligence to generate passable regular expression queries. Story 80. Mostly to search for information without having to go too deep into articles. It is pretty good at generating summaries as long as you take its phrasing with several grains of salt. Story 81. I use it as a wall to throw things at to see what sticks. Occasionally, it throws things back. Story 82. I am running one locally in a virtual machine, Alma Mistral 7B, and I find it useful for general questions instead of using a search engine. I recently experimented with role-playing with it, and it was a mediocre experience. You really have to word your prompts correctly. Otherwise, it will do unexpected things. Story 83. Not much of anything right now. I used to subscribe to Midjourney to try using it to ideate and generate mood concepts, but I found most of them less interesting than my own ideas. Some bits and pieces were useful from time to time. I also tried using Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to help write Maya embedded language scripts for functions in Autodesk Maya, but it produced nonsense code, such as using functions that do not exist. So, I stopped doing that and mostly rely on the internet and technical artist friends. I tried using it for some text adventure activities, but it did not end up being very interesting. However, I would love to use it for creating visual aids for a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I imagine it would be pretty good for that and would love to give it a shot sometime. Story 84. My employer has an artificial intelligence program that helps give feedback to employees on their work. It is actually pretty useful but not useful enough to replace our management team. Story 85. Meal planning, shopping trips, and creating grocery lists that correspond with the meal plan. Story 86. Any kind of writing that does not require creativity but is a chore to write. For example, cover letters. Even this requires significant human authorship. I usually write an outline for my cover letter, ask Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to turn it into an actual letter format, and then spend considerable time editing the output to make it sound better. Asking it to do most of the work leads to it making up false information that I would never be able to back up in an interview and sounding too clinical even for formal writing. I also use it when I have something on the tip of my tongue and search engines give me irrelevant results. Hey Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Who is that person who did something? Then I Google the name it gives me to make sure it is correct and not a hallucination. I use it to make emails sound more polite. I often worry about how ambiguous my emails sound and whether the recipient might misinterpret the tone. I could spend a long time agonizing over the perfect wording, or I could write my email and ask Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to reword it in a friendly way. This is helpful when giving students feedback and I want to tell them what they can improve on without sounding harsh. Finally, I use it to generate interesting images. I do not consider it art, so I do not exhibit it or do anything with it. There are enough social media pages of generic artificial intelligence-generated art that nobody cares to see. But that does not mean it is not fun to experiment with. Story 87. I ask ChatGPT and Gemini often about various technologies. I try to use very specific questions, and most of the time they are correct. Not like, hey, how do I do this? But more like, using software X, version Y. What is the meaning of configuration option whatever? I have also used them for non-technical things where I have no idea where to start. For example, I want to build an outdoor hockey rink. How would I start the process? That is where the conversation and context aspect is very helpful. There are lots of follow-up questions, and eventually, usually, can I get the source for that? I do not trust it any more than some random person who claims expertise. I verify anything I might rely upon for decision-making. Story 88. I use recipes and substitute ingredients with ones I have, adjusting quantities as necessary. Story 89. I have asked Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to develop a Dungeons and Dragons adventure idea I had. I also used Bing's image generator for some placeholder artwork in a board game I am developing. Story 90. I could not figure out how artificial intelligence will enter the transactions in a bank statement and then reconcile them. Please help. Story 91. Programming. GitHub Copilot makes writing code a lot faster. Its suggestions are wrong more often than right, but mostly close enough to be useful. Occasionally, it is exactly correct. Also, when I need the syntax for example, some application programming interface call, it is often easier to just ask Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer than to search through the documentation myself. Story 92. At home, I tell it I have certain foods and ask for a crockpot recipe that can incorporate them. Boom, instant and relevant recipe. Not just for crockpots, but all sorts of recipes. That is where I use it most. I also have a medical condition, so I can ask it to give me a healthy recipe while considering a list of specific factors. Also at home, it is extremely helpful in explaining complex medical language. For instance, I had a very serious medical issue, and while my doctor gave me the big picture, Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer helped me break down the details of some testing by giving me layman's terms for the test conclusions. At work, I am working on a project where they are teaching it to read data from documents and load it into a system. It is more than optical character recognition because every document is different. They are training it to do what a human could do by reviewing a document, categorizing the important parts, and extracting them. Technologies like this will significantly affect frontline jobs in America over the next 5 years. Story 93. I ask all kinds of questions, typically when I am doing research. Story 94. Helps me with pharmacology as a resource but must be fact-checked and taken with a grain of salt. Story 95. Most of the time it is delving into Elder Scrolls lore and justifying my hatred of the Blades. Story 96. We have started implementing artificial intelligence for detecting fraud in market research surveys. We are also seeing some survey script generation tools using artificial intelligence, though they are still in the early stages and require extensive manual editing to become usable code. Story 97. I game master a role-playing game group, so sometimes I use artificial intelligence to give me ideas for things. Or I have an idea and ask the artificial intelligence to flesh the idea out into something more concrete that I can work into a story. I also use it to generate non-player character text and dialogue. I use generative art artificial intelligence for tabletop role-playing game art assets to show players what a character, place, or object looks like. I also use generative art for background art on my computer. I sometimes use artificial intelligence when researching things not as a primary source, but as a secondary source. Sometimes I ask it to explain certain terminology or concepts in an alternative manner to the textbook answer, so that I can get a better understanding of the terminology or concept I am researching. It is also good at making lists and bullet point items. Story 98. I treat it as my conscience, either to convince me to do something or to talk me out of it. Story 99. Only for translation and email templates at work. Man, am I feeling too old to learn new things? Story 100. I was shocked to find that my state school system actively advocated using artificial intelligence to produce tests, grading rubrics, class lessons, and similar materials. I have used it for these purposes and found that with enough revisions and consistent checking, it does create workable educational tools in less time than it would take me to do it from scratch. The other major use they encouraged was to use artificial intelligence to detect the use of artificial intelligence by students when writing essays. Luckily, I do not have this problem. I teach a culinary class. All my non-practical tests are fill-in-the-blank or short answers on paper. Phones are banned in class. The challenges are inside the gates. We might as well become competent. Story 101. Oh boy, I've been using it a lot. I take text into artificial intelligence and ask for plain language. Too many words need clarification for me. I dislike artificial intelligence summaries. Instead, I ask for points to ponder before reading content. This gives me things to look for instead of relying on summaries alone. I use artificial intelligence to convert my sarcasm into professional tones. Many of these terms have been used against me, and I was oblivious to it. Now I am more aware. I've been using an artificial intelligence transcription tool for 3 years. This is the first year I had artificial intelligence write my report for me by giving it a template to follow and using my meeting transcripts to fill in the details. Absolutely awesome. I've been writing blogs and using artificial intelligence to edit them for me. I use prompt engineering to add or edit content or clarify points. I get really lost in the details. There are so many variables to consider. I like using the ChatGPT voice app for choose your own adventure stories. I can ask it to start a story and give it something to focus on, then change directions with each pause it takes for feedback. I've been using artificial intelligence to describe infographics to me. Some of those library infographics are dense with information. Artificial intelligence extracts and makes sense of it all. Just for fun, I have it describe memes to me. Story 102. The people who say they do not may not deliberately use artificial intelligence, but it is built into almost all of the technology we use every day in some capacity. Artificial intelligence is highly complex, but predictive algorithms are integrated into nearly every piece of software people use daily. Logging into Reddit, a predictive algorithm determines which post appears at the top of your feed. That purchase you made? Marketing now heavily depends on artificial intelligence. Your buying habits are influenced by artificial intelligence whether you are aware of it or not. Google Maps, any technology you use at work, all of it utilizes artificial intelligence in some way. Even if you are not using ChatGPT to write cover letters, You are using artificial intelligence every single day, probably many times over. Story 103. I am a podcast producer and I mainly use it to add subtitles to my clients' videos. Story 104. Either to entertain him or for unimportant homework when it was late and I had forgotten it. Story 105. Writing clinic notes for my patient visits while I can just sit and talk with the patient instead of handwriting notes like I used to. Story 106. Entertainment. He was really good at basketball. Don't get him started on practice. Story 107. I tried to create a few interesting images and answer a detailed question with a long response, but it could not do either correctly, so I gave up. Story 108. I used it to see what instructions it gave me for a game once when artificial intelligence was new. I used it a few more times to see what images it would generate. Story 109. Mainly curious random questions, self-improvement, and learning knowledge. Basically treating it like a search engine without the video games and video sharing platform. Story 110. I use artificial intelligence to role-play in games. I write what I want to say, and then have artificial intelligence rewrite it in a specific voice. It helped a lot when role-playing a character who is a social media influencer. Story 111. I finally convinced my wife, who has serious trouble writing due to dyslexia, to use ChatGPT as her editor instead of me. We set up an instance where all she has to do is paste her rough draft emails, and ChatGPT produces a fully edited version much like I would, except in a fraction of the time and without having to wait for me to be available. Story 112. I have used it to write some very basic Excel macros, compose an online dating profile and professional emails, and it is currently helping me move to a new state. Story 113. My naturally occurring intelligence recommends that I not stoop to artificial replacements. Story 114. Creativity when I am in a slump. I have conversations with characters in stories I am writing to see if artificial intelligence can come up with anything different from what I am working on. Story 115. Reading through terms and conditions. Writing character backstory skeletons in Dungeons and Dragons. Creating songs about unique situations for my friends. Creating fun images for friends. Story 116. I have been using it to help plan my Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Like, write a description of a cellar, damp and cold and full of various junk and storage. The setting is fantasy. There is a secret passage hidden in the corner brickwork, but it cannot be seen. Make sure to detail other walls as well. Light only comes from torchlight. Tone eerie and on edge. Include smells as well as visual description. Response below. A few tweaks here and there, maybe some back and forth. But it gets easier if you have asked it to describe the house and outside as well. Just don't do what I did and spam so much into a single conversation. It starts to slow down and crash after a bit. Try to keep the conversation focused. The cellar sprawled beneath the manor like a forgotten crypt, shrouded in darkness save for the thin, trembling glow of a solitary torch. The light licked the walls, revealing their damp, moss-covered surfaces, where water trickled in thin streams, carving paths through. The grime and pooling at the base. The bricks, rough-hewn and ancient, seemed to bulge inward as if burdened by the weight of centuries pressing down from above. A pungent odor of rot and mold hung thick in the air, mixed with the bitter, metallic tang of rust. Each wall told a story of neglect. To the left, sagging wooden shelves lined with dusty jars and bottles leaned perilously, their contents long forgotten, save for the occasional murky liquid or dried-up residue that clung stubbornly to the glass. The right wall was obscured by a towering heap of junk, broken furniture, shattered crates, and tattered sacks, all jumbled together in a chaotic mass, their edges softened by the encroaching darkness. Amidst the debris, the flicker of the torchlight caught glimpses of corroded metal, perhaps tools or ancient weapons, now rendered useless by time. The far wall, however, was different. It seemed to draw the shadows in, the torchlight struggling to illuminate its full expanse. The bricks here were more uneven, some jutting out just slightly, while others were recessed as if worn away by unseen hands. The air was cooler near this wall, the scent of damp earth more pronounced, mingling with something else, something faintly sweet, yet sickly, like the remnants of a long-extinguished fire. In the corner, the bricks sagged more noticeably, though there was nothing to suggest it was more than just another section of the cellar's decaying structure. Yet despite its apparent innocence, this corner held a peculiar stillness, as though the very stones were listening, waiting, guarding a secret hidden deep within the walls. The floor beneath was slick and uneven, a treacherous mix of cracked stone and scattered debris. Every step echoed unervingly in the confined space, the sound swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere, as if the cellar itself conspired to keep its secrets buried. The smell of wet earth, decay, and the acrid tang of old metal filled the lungs, clinging to the senses like a foul miasma that only deepened the unease in the pit of the stomach. Story 117. I watch Neurosama for entertainment. I occasionally use Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to assist with programming-related projects. Story 118. Nothing much right now. Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer was really useful for bouncing ideas off of when I was running my Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Most of my friends are in my Dungeons & Dragons group or don't know much about Dungeons & Dragons. I fed it a lot of the background, both of my players and my world, and it did a decent job keeping everything straight. Story 119. I am a software engineering technical lead under a tight deadline to deliver a cloud configuration management document. The problem is I am not a DevOps specialist. I have some experience with Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services, but I am not qualified to create a definitive process document. I asked an AI assistant to help break down concepts and formulate a plan, which gave me a draft to review with experts at work. Story 120. Checking my tone in an email, improving performance review examples, coding help, and summarizing my notes. Story 121. Literally nothing. Any need I have had that artificial intelligence could have solved, the artificial intelligence product was useless. Story 122. Reducing mental load in my daily life by helping with planning and organization. It is not as good as I want it to be, but I am surrounded by people who are even worse, so it is honestly liberating not to be the one planning and organizing things in my head all the time. It is like having an assistant in my life whenever I want. Story 123. Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer gives me 2 cartoons of my cats every day for free. Story 124. For creating work-related applications that can speed up workflows. I simply provide the app's requirements, and it generates one for me. I can easily copy and paste it. I have no coding experience. Story 125. Summarizing self-help and business books. Generating ideas for meetings at work. Most importantly, creating rough drafts for birthday and wedding cards. Story 126. Entertainment. I can give it just a few words and it will generate paragraphs of fun. Dungeons and Dragons monsters and magic items, scenes of drama and comedy, and more. Or I can provide an outline of something I saw or read and explain how I would have done it differently, and it will create the alternative. Sometimes I even keep the results for later inspiration. Story 127. Not much. I got tired of it making up libraries and function names that do not exist or just generating code that was logically incorrect. Yes, I have used the latest generative pre-trained transformer version for as well as having subscriptions to products made specifically for these sorts of tasks. It is useful for simple tasks like putting text in a specific format and bouncing ideas off of, I will admit. It is also helpful for looking things up quickly when it is not generating incorrect information. Story 128. I use Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to ask the most random questions I have on my mind. Story 129. Lately, I have been having a lot of fun with Suno, making songs that are much better than expected. Sometimes I use Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to curate the lyrics. Story 130. Entertainment purposes only. Artificial intelligence is not smart enough for anything beyond that. Story 131. Nothing until it can only represent the truth. So developers need to program methods of identifying false information. Story 132. I use it to generate lists of character names when I cannot think of one that matches the theme or powers of my superhero characters in the massively multiplayer online game I play. Story 133. I still forget that it exists usually. I have tried using Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer for Dungeons and Dragons, but it is not accurate within the rules, and it forgets or overwrites things too easily. Mostly, it is only good for one-off tasks. Story 134. I think technically the way keyboards work on phones by default uses some type of artificial intelligence. I do not intentionally use generative artificial intelligence because it is theft. Story 135. I use Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer for many things. Meal plans and shopping lists, workout schedules, writing a letter complaining to the county, budgeting plans, creating stories for my son, and anything else I need to know. It makes tasks really easy and provides step-by-step guidance. I like that I can ask specific questions instead of searching for answers. It is an absolute lifesaver for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It helps unravel my brain sometimes. Story 136. Work requires us to complete these IT training sessions. I simply enter all the questions, and it provides me with the answers. Story 137. Write me a resume entry using the following job requirements. Paste job requirements from the job you are applying for. Story 138. Nothing. While I know I cannot avoid it forever, it is built heavily on stolen work. I do not feel ethical using it. Story 139. I use artificial intelligence to stimulate my urge to consume human flesh via bots. Story 140. Helping me create adventures for running role-playing games. Story 141. Mostly for help with complex tasks in Microsoft Excel. Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer has helped me learn tools like Power Query and Power Pivot very quickly. Story 142. To annoy myself by contemplating the plight of the human race. Story 143. I am dyslexic, but I love writing stories. I struggle because of my dyslexia. I have many stories made up in my head. I write a story with very basic vocabulary, then I ask the artificial intelligence to improve it for me. Story 144. Creating complex bash scripts that I am too inexperienced to create but just knowledgeable enough to know are possible. Story 145. Nothing, because artificial intelligence uses more electricity than Bitcoin and relies less on clean sources of energy. Story 146. Goofing off. I will go to 11 labs, create something funny, and then send it to my friends. Story 147. Absolutely nothing. Just because something is new and shiny does not mean it is good for you. You people will never learn. Story 148. I use it for various purposes in my business, such as writing social media posts, product descriptions, and finding ways to automate or streamline processes. Story 149. Rants. It is weird that whenever I use artificial intelligence to communicate about my anxiety, I feel a little better. Story 150. I have been on a Game of Thrones kick and using Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to generate a fictional Game of Thrones-style Kingdom of Canada. I have detailed the major houses that rule each province. The territories are united under one great house, along with some of the minor houses that govern each portion of their territory. I have had fun making my small hometown the seat of one of the minor houses, and I have gone as far as detailing the castle from which they rule. It is fun. Story 151. I used the Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to write my resume and cover letter. They both look great. Story 152. PowerShell scripts are useful. I also use them to create summaries of books my child is reading so I can help with book reports. I wonder if GitHub Copilot does recipes well. Story 153. I have used it to write cover letters for jobs as a framework. I have used it to help write my colleague reviews and then edit them to be more personalized or to fix any issues. I have used it to help me learn how to write emails when I have difficulty. It is an amazing tool. My sister's company has recommended their engineers use their own version of Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer to assist with coding. Story 154. ChatGPT and Claude for many tasks. They are now a part of my workflow. AllTalk text-to-speech is used for cloning commentaries in my gaming videos. I use mixing and mastering AI websites sometimes, but most of the time I just explore on Bandcamp. Story 155. Conceptualizing unusual ideas helps me visualize an image that guides me artistically toward a creative visual I cannot manifest on my own. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.